Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a person who never admits, "I was wrong." At first glance, it might seem like a sign of strength or confidence. After all, isn't it easier to stick to your opinions, stand firm, and appear unwavering in your convictions? But beneath that unyielding exterior lies a fundamental weakness, a fear of vulnerability, and an unwillingness to grow. To refuse to admit fault is to place your pride above truth. It's as though you are saying, "My image of perfection is more important than reality itself." But perfection is not what makes us human. It is our capacity to learn, adapt, and change that sets us apart. Refusing to say, "I was wrong," locks a person in a fixed mindset, a stagnant place where mistakes are buried instead of confronted. Acknowledging error is not an act of humiliation, it's an act of courage. It requires introspection, humility, and the strength to let go of the ego's grip. It means standing in the uncomfortable space between who you were yesterday and who you could be tomorrow. To admit you're wrong is to open the door to progress, both personally and in your relationships. In a world where collaboration is essential, a refusal to own up to mistakes creates division. It alienates others, building walls instead of bridges. People respect honesty, not the illusion of infallibility. No one trusts a leader or partner who cannot acknowledge their missteps. And how can you ever hope to gain wisdom if you're unwilling to admit that you lack it? This unwillingness stems often from fear of judgment, fear of losing face, or fear of appearing weak. But paradoxically, the refusal to admit fault creates the very perception of weakness that people are so desperate to avoid. A strong person is not one who is always right, but one who has the strength to embrace being wrong and rise above it. There is a powerful yet subtle force that underpins the refusal to admit fault, a battle between pride and truth. Pride, in its most fragile form, is an obsession with maintaining a flawless image. It is a relentless drive to appear unshakable, untouchable, and impervious to error. But this obsession is often blind to the deeper cost it incurs, the dismissal of truth itself. When someone refuses to utter the words, "I was wrong," they elevate their ego above the reality of their actions, decisions, or beliefs. This prioritization of self over pain over authenticity is not a sign of strength. Rather, it is a profound form of weakness cloaked in false confidence. By refusing to admit fault, a person builds a fragile wall around their identity, shielding themselves from the discomfort of vulnerability. However, this wall is not constructed with strength, but with fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, and fear of confronting the imperfections that make us human. This wall might appear strong from the outside, but its foundation is brittle. It cannot support growth, wisdom, or meaningful connections with others. Every time truth is sacrificed at the altar of pride, the opportunity for learning and personal development slips away. Admitting you were wrong is not a simple act of concession. It is a moment of alignment with reality. It requires the humility to accept that the world does not revolve around your personal narrative. When pride takes precedence over truth, the world becomes distorted. Mistakes are not seen as opportunities to improve, but as threats to an illusion of perfection. This distortion creates a self-imposed prison, where the individual becomes trapped in their need to be right. But what is rightness worth if it comes at the cost of honesty and self-growth? The irony is that no human being is infallible. Mistakes are inevitable, universal, and in many cases essential for learning. Yet the refusal to admit them is a direct denial of this fundamental truth. This denial causes stagnation as the individual becomes locked in a fixed mindset, unable to move forward or evolve. Growth requires confronting error, not avoiding it. Growth demands the courage to face the discomfort of being wrong and the willingness to learn from it. Without that willingness, life becomes a series of repeated mistakes disguised as consistency. The cost of prioritizing pride over truth extends beyond the individual. It ripples outward, affecting relationships, communities, and even institutions. People who refuse to acknowledge their mistakes erode trust. Relationships thrive on honesty and mutual respect, but when one party clings to pride, the balance is broken. It becomes difficult to connect with someone who refuses to own up to their missteps. And over time, this refusal fosters resentment and alienation. The same is true for organizations and leaders. Leaders who cannot admit fault create a culture of fear and stagnation, where innovation is stifled and progress is halted. The inability to embrace truth, even when it is uncomfortable, weakens the very fabric of collaboration and teamwork. The refusal to say "I was wrong" also stifles intellectual growth. At its core, learning is an acknowledgement of ignorance. Every new idea or perspective requires letting go of outdated beliefs and embracing the possibility that you did not have all the answers before. Pride resists this process. It clings to the illusion of omniscience, blocking the door to new knowledge and understanding. But truth is relentless. It cannot be silenced or avoided indefinitely. Eventually, reality asserts itself, often in ways that are far more painful than simply admitting fault in the first place. To place pride above truth is to prioritize an illusion over reality. It is to sacrifice growth, relationships, and wisdom for the fleeting satisfaction of appearing right. While it may feel safe to cling to the comfort of pride, this safety is an illusion. True strength lies in aligning oneself with truth, no matter how humbling that alignment may be. When someone refuses to admit "I was wrong," they unconsciously trap themselves in a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is the belief that one's abilities, intelligence, and character are static traits that cannot change. In this mental framework, admitting fault feels like an attack on one's very identity. It's as though saying "I made a mistake" becomes synonymous with saying "I am a mistake." This rigid perspective creates a self-imposed ceiling on growth, locking a person into the same patterns, habits, and blind spots that led to their error in the first place. The refusal to admit mistakes creates an illusion of certainty, but that certainty is fragile and easily shattered. It stems from a deep desire to protect one's sense of self-worth. People with a fixed mindset often view failure as a final verdict rather than a temporary setback. To them, admitting error feels like acknowledging a permanent flaw, so they go to great lengths to avoid that discomfort. Unfortunately, this avoidance comes at the expense of learning and personal development. Instead of confronting what went wrong and striving to improve, they double down on their original stance, reinforcing the very behaviors or beliefs that caused the issue. This mindset fosters a resistance to change. Growth requires the willingness to question old assumptions, challenge outdated beliefs, and revise ineffective strategies. But a fixed mindset rejects these processes. Instead of seeing challenges as opportunities to adapt, they are viewed as threats to one's self-emotion. This rigidity leaves little room for innovation or progress. Over time, the person becomes stagnant, unable to evolve or respond effectively to new circumstances. They become stuck in a loop of repetition, making the same mistakes over and over again without ever addressing the root cause. The impact of a fixed mindset extends beyond the individual. It affects how they interact with others and how others perceive them. Someone who cannot admit fault often creates tension in relationships, as their rigidity can come across as arrogance or dismissiveness. It's difficult to connect with someone who refuses to acknowledge their shortcomings or take responsibility for their actions. Over time, this can erode trust and create barriers to effective communication. In contrast, admitting mistakes fosters openness, understanding, and collaboration, qualities that are essential for healthy relationships and teamwork. The refusal to say "I was wrong" also limits intellectual growth. Learning is inherently a process of trial and error. Every discovery, every breakthrough is built on the foundation of mistakes and missteps. A fixed mindset denies this reality, clinging to the idea that intelligence and competence are fixed qualities that should never falter. This perspective not only stifles creativity, but also prevents the individual from reaching their full potential. By refusing to engage with failure, they miss out on the valuable lessons that come from it. Ironically, the fear of failure that drives a fixed mindset often leads to greater and more public failures. When mistakes are ignored or denied, they tend to compound over time. Problems that could have been addressed early on are allowed to grow, eventually reaching a point where they can no longer be concealed At this stage, the consequences are often far more severe than they would have been if the mistake had been acknowledged and corrected at the outset. The fixed mindset also creates a false sense of security. By refusing to admit fault, a person may feel as though they are protecting their reputation or preserving their image. However, this facade of perfection is unsustainable. People respect authenticity, not the illusion of infallibility. Over time, the inability to admit mistakes becomes more noticeable and less forgivable. The very thing the person was trying to avoid, judgment or criticism, becomes more pronounced. A refusal to admit fault is not just a refusal to face the truth, it's a refusal to grow. It locks a person into a cycle of stagnation, where mistakes are repeated, opportunities are missed, and relationships are strained. While the fixed mindset may feel like a protective shield, it ultimately becomes a cage, preventing the individual from reaching their true potential. Acknowledging mistakes requires a profound level of courage. It's not merely about confessing an error, but about willingly stepping into a space of vulnerability. Vulnerability is uncomfortable, even intimidating, but it is also one of the most profound demonstrations of strength. When someone says, "I was wrong," they are not only admitting to a moment of imperfection, they are taking responsibility for their actions and accepting the inherent flaws in their humanity. This act of honesty defies the natural tendency to protect one's ego and projects a sense of integrity and resilience. The difficulty of admitting fault lies in its confrontation with the ego. The ego thrives on the illusion of invulnerability, constructing a protective shell around identity to keep it safe from external criticism. To admit a mistake is to crack that shell and expose oneself to judgment. This exposure feels risky, as though it might diminish how others perceive you, or worse, how you perceive yourself. As a person of interest, but this risk is also where growth resides. Courage comes from facing that fear head on, understanding that strength is not about appearing flawless, but about being authentic and accountable. Admitting wrongdoing requires self-awareness, an often overlooked aspect of courage. To say, "I was wrong," one must first have the humility to reflect on their actions and recognize where they fell short. This introspection takes effort. It requires pausing, listening to feedback, and setting aside the defensive instincts that naturally arise when we feel our decisions or beliefs are being challenged. It means confronting the fact that you are not always right, and that's okay. Self-awareness opens the door to improvement, while the courage to embrace it allows you to walk through that door. Courage in vulnerability is transformative not only for the individual but for those around them. When someone admits fault, it humanizes them. It shows others that they are not afraid to confront their imperfections, making them more relatable and trustworthy. This honesty fosters deeper connections, whether in personal relationships, the workplace, or larger social interactions. People respect those who can own their mistakes because it signals emotional maturity and strength of character. It demonstrates a commitment to truth and accountability rather than an attachment to maintaining a perfect facade. Furthermore, the act of acknowledging mistakes can inspire others to do the same. Courage is contagious. When people see someone else admit fault without succumbing to shame or self-pity, they realize that it's okay to be imperfect too. It creates a ripple effect, encouraging an environment of openness where mistakes are seen as opportunities to learn, rather than liabilities to be hidden. In this way, vulnerability becomes a catalyst for collective growth, transforming not just individuals, but the cultures and communities they are a part of. Many people fear that admitting they were wrong will make them appear weak or incompetent. In reality, the opposite is true. Strength is not found in stubbornly clinging to an error, but in the ability to let go of pride and embrace the truth. To own up to a mistake is to demonstrate confidence in your ability to learn and grow. It signals that you are not defined by your errors, but by how you respond to them. This resilience is far more powerful than any illusion of infallibility. It is also worth noting that courage is not the absence of fear, it is action in the face of fear. Admitting fault can feel intimidating because it opens you to criticism and scrutiny, but it also invites understanding and resolution. By taking ownership of your actions, you regain control over the narrative. You are no longer at the mercy of external judgment because you have already confronted the truth head on. This proactive stance empowers you to move forward with clarity and purpose. When vulnerability and courage are embraced, they pave the way for growth. Mistakes become stepping stones, not barriers, and setbacks become opportunities for deeper understanding. This mindset shifts the focus from avoiding failure to embracing improvement. Each admission of fault becomes a moment of progress, a step closer to becoming the best version of yourself. True courage lies not in denying weakness, but in acknowledging it and using it as a foundation for strength. Admitting fault is one of the most powerful ways to unlock personal and professional growth. Growth is not a passive process. It requires active participation, introspection, and a willingness to confront one's own limitations. The ability to say, "I was wrong," is a critical step in this journey because it opens the door to transformation. It shifts the focus from defending one's ego to seeking truth, improvement, and the potential for change. Growth thrives in an environment of adaptability, and admitting fault is a demonstration of that adaptability in action. When someone acknowledges their mistakes, they take the first step toward identifying areas that need improvement. It's impossible to fix what you refuse to recognize. By admitting fault, you allow yourself to see the gaps in your knowledge, judgment, or behavior. This self-awareness is a gift because it highlights opportunities for learning and evolution. Without it, you remain blind to your own shortcomings, perpetuating the same mistakes and limiting your potential. True growth begins with the humility to face these truths even when they are uncomfortable or humbling. The process of admitting fault also rewires the way we approach failure. Mistakes, when acknowledged, are no longer final verdicts on our worth or abilities. Instead, they become stepping stones, essential components of the learning process. Failure provides data. It tells us what didn't work, what needs adjustment, and what we can do differently in the future. Admitting fault allows us to extract the value from these experiences, transforming setbacks into catalysts for progress. This mindset is essential for anyone striving to improve, whether in their personal life, their relationships, or their career. A critical aspect of growth is the willingness to challenge old beliefs and habits. When we admit fault, we create space for new perspectives to take root. It's an act of clearing away the mental clutter of outdated ideas and making room for fresh insights. This openness is a cornerstone of adaptability, which is crucial in a rapidly changing world. People who cling stubbornly to their mistakes are often left behind because they are unable to adjust to new information or circumstances. Admitting fault, on the other hand, signals flexibility, a trait that allows individuals to evolve and thrive no matter what challenges they face. Admitting fault is also a powerful way to build resilience. Resilience is not about avoiding failure. It's about bouncing back stronger after experiencing it. By taking ownership of your mistakes, you take control of the narrative. Instead of being defined by the error, you define yourself by your response to it. This proactive stance fosters a sense of agency and empowerment, which are essential components of resilience. Over time, this practice builds a mindset that views challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles, paving the way for consistent growth. The willingness to admit fault has a profound ripple effect on relationships. Growth often happens in the context of others through collaboration, feedback, and shared experiences. When you admit your mistakes, you demonstrate accountability, humility, and a commitment to improvement. These qualities inspire trust and respect, which are essential for meaningful connections. People are more likely to offer constructive feedback, support, and guidance when they see that you are open to learning from your errors. This dynamic creates a positive feedback loop where your willingness to grow invites others to help you along that journey. On a professional level, admitting fault is a hallmark of effective leadership. The best leaders are not those who claim to be perfect, but those who model adaptability and a growth mindset. When a leader acknowledges their mistakes, it sets a powerful example for their team. It creates a culture where learning is prioritized over blame and progress is valued more than perfection. Which leads us, this environment fosters innovation, collaboration, and continuous improvement, qualities that are essential for success in any field. Admitting fault also strengthens personal integrity. Growth is not just about skill development or external achievements, it's about becoming a better version of yourself. Each time you admit a mistake, you align your actions with your values, demonstrating honesty and accountability. This alignment builds a sense of inner confidence and self-respect, which fuels further growth. It creates a positive cycle where each admission of fault reinforces your commitment to improvement, making it easier to embrace future challenges with courage and curiosity. The act of admitting fault is not an admission of weakness. It is a declaration of your readiness to grow. It signals that you are not afraid to face the truth, to challenge yourself, and to pursue the better version of who you can be. Growth is a journey, not a destination, and it requires a mindset that is open to change, willing to learn, and unafraid to confront its own imperfections. By admitting fault, you step onto the path of continual evolution, opening yourself to the endless possibilities of what you can achieve and who you can become. The refusal to admit fault creates a ripple effect in relationships, one that often leads to strain, disconnection, and mistrust. Relationships, whether personal or professional, are built on a foundation of honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. When someone consistently avoids admitting their mistakes, it undermines this foundation, eroding the trust and goodwill that are essential for meaningful connections. Over time, this behavior creates a dynamic where the individual becomes harder to relate to, harder to work with, and ultimately harder to trust. One of the most damaging aspects of refusing to admit fault is the perception it creates in others. While the individual may believe they are protecting their image or maintaining authority by avoiding accountability, the opposite effect often occurs. People are keen observers of behavior, and they quickly notice when someone deflects responsibility or refuses to own up to their actions. This behavior is perceived as arrogance, defensiveness, or a lack of self-awareness. It sends the message that the person values their ego more than the relationship or the shared goal. Over time, this creates a barrier as others begin to view them as unapproachable, stubborn, or unreliable. In personal relationships, the inability to admit fault can be particularly damaging. Trust is the cornerstone of any strong connection, and trust is built on honesty. When someone refuses to acknowledge their mistakes, it creates a sense of imbalance in the relationship. The other party may feel unheard, invalidated, or even manipulated. This dynamic can lead to resentment, as the burden of addressing issues or resolving conflicts often falls disproportionately on the person who is willing to take responsibility. Over time, this imbalance erodes the relationship, creating distance and diminishing emotional intimacy. In professional settings, the refusal to admit mistakes can be equally harmful. Collaboration depends on open communication and a willingness to learn from setbacks. When someone refuses to own up to an error, it stifles the collaborative process and creates an atmosphere of defensiveness. Teams thrive when members feel safe to share their thoughts, ideas, and feedback. But this safety diminishes when individuals prioritize self-preservation over transparency. Colleagues may become hesitant to provide constructive criticism, fearing that it will be met with denial or deflection. As a result, the team's overall effectiveness and cohesion suffer. Furthermore, refusing to admit fault can have a chilling effect on problem solving. Mistakes are an inevitable part of any endeavor, and addressing them promptly is essential for progress. When someone refuses to take accountability, it delays resolution and shifts the focus away from finding solutions. Instead of working collaboratively to fix the issue, energy is wasted on assigning blame or defending positions. This not only hinders productivity, but also creates a toxic dynamic where people are more concerned with protecting themselves than achieving the shared goal. Another consequence of avoiding accountability is the message it sends about personal values. Admitting fault is a way of saying, I value this relationship enough to be honest about my shortcomings. It shows humility, respect, and a commitment to growth. Conversely, refusing to admit fault signals that the individual prioritizes their ego over the relationship. This behavior diminishes respect and weakens the bonds that hold people together. Over time, others may become less willing to invest in the relationship, feeling that their efforts are not reciprocated. On the flip side, admitting fault has the power to repair and strengthen relationships. When someone acknowledges their mistakes, it demonstrates accountability and a willingness to grow. This act of humility fosters empathy and understanding, as it shows that the individual is human and capable of learning from their errors. It creates an atmosphere of trust where others feel safe to be open about their own mistakes and vulnerabilities. This mutual openness deepens connections and enhances collaboration, creating a dynamic where both parties feel valued and respected. Admitting fault also diffuses tension in conflicts. In any disagreement, emotions often run high and defensiveness can escalate the situation. However, when one party takes responsibility for their actions, it de-escalates the conflict and paves the way for resolution. This act of accountability shifts the focus from assigning blame to finding solutions, allowing both parties to move forward constructively. It also sets a powerful example, encouraging others to approach conflicts with humility and a focus on resolution rather than winning. Ultimately, relationships thrive on authenticity, and authenticity requires the courage to be honest about one's imperfections. Refusing to admit fault creates walls, but admitting mistakes builds bridges. It shows others that you are willing to prioritize the relationship over your pride, fostering trust and respect in the process. Relationships, whether personal or professional, are not about perfection. They're about connection, understanding, and mutual growth. By owning your mistakes, you create a foundation for stronger, healthier, and more meaningful connections. The refusal to admit fault often results in a dangerous cycle of stagnation, where mistakes are repeated, growth is stifled, and opportunities for improvement are missed. Mistakes, by their very nature, are inevitable. They are part of the human experience, and they serve as a mirror reflecting areas that require attention, adjustment, or change. However, when someone denies their errors or refuses to take responsibility for them, they block the natural process of learning, or this unwillingness to acknowledge fault perpetuates the same patterns of behavior, creating a feedback loop where the individual continues to make the same missteps without addressing their root causes. The act of denying fault is not neutral. It is a choice that has consequences. When someone refuses to admit they were wrong, they miss the chance to analyze what went awry and why. Reflection is a critical component of growth, and it begins with taking ownership of one's actions. Without this ownership, there is no incentive to dig deeper, to understand the factors that contributed to the mistake, or to implement changes that could prevent it from happening again. So the result is a cycle of repetition where the same errors are made repeatedly, often with increasing consequences over time. This pattern is particularly evident in professional settings, where accountability is crucial for progress and innovation. Consider a team leader who refuses to admit they made a poor decision on a project. Instead of acknowledging their mistake and seeking input on how to improve, they continue to push forward with the same flawed approach. The team, hesitant to challenge the leader's authority, may follow along despite their reservations. The result is not only the failure of the project, but also the erosion of team morale and trust. The leader's inability to admit fault has perpetuated a cycle of inefficiency and discontent, ultimately harming both the team and the organization. In personal relationships, the refusal to admit mistakes has equally damaging effects. Relationships thrive on communication, trust, and mutual understanding. When someone refuses to own up to their faults, it creates a dynamic where issues are swept under the rug rather than resolved. Over time, this avoidance leads to unresolved conflicts, growing resentment, and a breakdown in communication. The same arguments may resurface repeatedly because the underlying issues are never truly addressed. This cycle of avoidance and repetition prevents the relationship from evolving and deepening, leaving both parties feeling stuck and frustrated. The refusal to admit fault also stifles creativity and innovation. Growth and progress require experimentation, and experimentation inevitably involves trial and error. Mistakes are a natural and necessary part of this process. However, if someone is unwilling to acknowledge their errors, they also miss the opportunity to learn from them. Fear of admitting fault can lead to a conservative, risk-averse mindset, where the individual avoids trying new things altogether. This mindset limits their ability to adapt, innovate, and explore new possibilities, leaving them trapped in a cycle of mediocrity. Beyond personal and professional stagnation, the refusal to admit fault can create a broader ripple effect. It fosters a culture of defensiveness and blame shifting, where mistakes are hidden rather than addressed. This culture discourages open communication and honest feedback, creating an environment where growth is nearly impossible. In organizations, this can lead to systemic inefficiencies, as recurring problems are ignored or denied rather than resolved. On a societal level, it perpetuates cycles of misunderstanding, conflict, and mistrust, as individuals and groups remain entrenched in their positions rather than seeking common ground. Breaking free from this cycle requires humility and courage. Admitting fault is not just about acknowledging a single mistake. It is about committing to a mindset of continuous improvement. It is about recognizing that mistakes are not failures, but opportunities to learn and grow. Each time someone admits they were wrong, they disrupt the cycle of repetition and create space for change. They open the door to new perspectives, new approaches, and new possibilities. This willingness to embrace accountability and learn from errors is what drives progress, both for the individual and for the systems and relationships they are part of. The cycle of repeating mistakes is not inevitable, it is a choice. By refusing to admit fault, individuals choose stagnation over growth, denial over truth, and pride over progress. However, by choosing to take responsibility for their actions, they break free from this cycle and set themselves on a path of continuous learning and improvement. Admitting fault is not a sign of weakness. It is a powerful act of self-awareness and strength. It is the first step toward breaking patterns that no longer serve us, opening the door to a future filled with growth, innovation, and the potential for true transformation. Admitting fault is one of the most authentic ways to foster trust and build credibility, both of which are cornerstones of meaningful relationships and effective leadership. Trust is not something that can be commanded or demanded. It must be earned through consistent actions that demonstrate honesty, accountability, and reliability. When a person is willing to say, "I was wrong," they show a commitment to truth and integrity that resonates deeply with others. This willingness to be transparent about mistakes creates an environment where trust can flourish and credibility can grow. At the heart of trust lies vulnerability. To admit fault is to open yourself to judgment, criticism, and the possibility of losing face. However, it is this very vulnerability that makes the act so powerful. By acknowledging mistakes, you demonstrate that you are more concerned with doing what is right than with preserving an illusion of perfection. This authenticity builds trust because it shows others that you are willing to be honest, even when it is uncomfortable. It signals that you are not hiding behind a facade or trying to manipulate the narrative, but instead you are standing firmly in the truth. Credibility, which is closely tied to trust, is built on a foundation of accountability. People are more likely to respect and follow someone who takes responsibility for their actions. Whether in personal relationships or professional settings, the ability to admit fault demonstrates a level of maturity and self-awareness that enhances credibility. It tells others that you are not afraid to own your mistakes and that you are committed to learning and improving. This reliability fosters confidence in your character and judgment, making it easier for others to believe in you and your intentions. Admitting fault also humanizes you, which is a crucial element of trust. Perfection is not relatable. It creates distance between individuals because it is unattainable and often perceived as insincere. When you admit to being wrong, you remind others that you too are fallible and that mistakes are a natural part of being human. This relatability breaks down barriers and fosters a sense of connection. People are more likely to trust someone who is honest about their imperfections than someone who refuses to acknowledge them. It shows humility, and humility is a powerful tool for building bridges between individuals. In leadership, the ability to admit fault is even more significant. Leaders are often viewed as role models, and their actions set the tone for those they lead. When a leader admits they were wrong, it sends a powerful message to their team. It is okay to make mistakes, and what matters most is how you respond to them. This openness creates a culture of trust and psychological safety, where team members feel comfortable taking risks, sharing ideas, and admitting their own mistakes. In such an environment, innovation and collaboration thrive because individuals are not paralyzed by the fear of failure. Conversely, a leader who refuses to admit fault risks undermining their credibility and alienating their team. This behavior can create a culture of defensiveness, where individuals prioritize self-preservation over the collective good. Team members may become reluctant to speak up or offer feedback, fearing that their concerns will be dismissed or ignored. Over time, this erodes trust and damages relationships, making it difficult for the leader to inspire loyalty or drive meaningful progress. Admitting fault, on the other hand, demonstrates humility and accountability, qualities that are essential for effective leadership and the trust of a team. In personal relationships, admitting fault plays an equally important role in building trust. Relationships thrive on communication, understanding, and mutual respect. When one party refuses to acknowledge their mistakes, it creates a sense of imbalance and undermines the trust that is necessary for a healthy connection. Admitting fault, however, demonstrates respect for the other person's perspective and a willingness to take responsibility for one's actions. It shows that you value the relationship enough to be honest, and that you are committed to resolving issues and moving forward. This act of accountability also sets the tone for reciprocity. When you admit your mistakes, it encourages others to do the same. Trust is a two-way street, and by modeling honesty and vulnerability, you create an environment where others feel safe to be honest as well. This mutual openness strengthens the bond between individuals, fostering deeper connections and more meaningful relationships. It creates a cycle of trust and accountability, where both parties feel valued and supported. Ultimately, trust and credibility are not built through perfection, but through authenticity. People respect those who are willing to admit when they are wrong because it shows courage, integrity, and a commitment to growth. It demonstrates that you are not afraid to face the truth and that you are willing to take responsibility for your actions. In doing so, you create a foundation of trust that can withstand challenges and grow stronger over time. Admitting fault is not a weakness. It is one of the most powerful ways to build credibility and earn the trust of those around you. Admitting fault, though often seen as a momentary act of humility, has a far-reaching impact on personal integrity. Integrity, at its core, is the alignment between one's words, actions, and values. It is about being honest with yourself and others, living authentically, and upholding ethical principles, even when it is inconvenient or difficult. When you admit that you were wrong, you reaffirm your commitment to these principles, demonstrating a level of honesty and self-awareness that strengthens your character and earns respect. Admitting fault is a declaration of truth, and truth is the foundation upon which integrity is built. To live with integrity, one must have the courage to face reality, even when it reflects poorly on them. This act requires not only acknowledging your mistakes to others, but also being honest with yourself. It demands an unflinching look at your own decisions, behaviors, and their consequences. By admitting fault, you take ownership of these truths, refusing to hide behind excuses, rationalizations, or blame. This ownership is a powerful act of self-respect because it signifies that you hold yourself accountable to the standards you claim to value. Refusing to admit fault, on the other hand, creates a dissonance between your actions and your values. It often stems from a desire to protect your image, avoid embarrassment, or maintain control. However, this avoidance undermines your integrity because it prioritizes your ego over the truth. Over time, this dissonance can erode your sense of self, leaving you feeling disconnected and inauthentic. Integrity cannot coexist with denial, as denial requires you to distort reality and compromise the principles you claim to uphold. Admitting fault is not just about rectifying the past, it is about shaping the future. Each time you acknowledge a mistake, you reaffirm your commitment to personal growth and ethical living. It is an opportunity to learn from your errors and ensure they are not repeated. This process of reflection and improvement strengthens your character, making you more resilient, self-awareness, and principled. It allows you to align more closely with the person you aspire to be, creating a sense of inner coherence that is deeply fulfilling. This alignment between actions and values is what makes individuals with integrity so trustworthy and inspiring. People respect those who are willing to admit their mistakes because it demonstrates authenticity and accountability. It shows that the individual values honesty and growth over preserving an illusion of infallibility. This trustworthiness is a hallmark of integrity, and it is what allows individuals to build meaningful relationships, lead effectively, and navigate challenges with grace. Admitting fault also fosters humility, which is a key component of integrity. Humility is the recognition that you are not perfect, that you have room to grow, and that you are not above making mistakes. It is the antidote to arrogance and defensiveness, which often prevent people from admitting their faults. When you embrace humility, you create space for learning, connection, and collaboration. You acknowledge that you do not have all the answers and that others may have perspectives, knowledge, or insights that can help you improve. This openness enhances your relationships and deepens your understanding of the world, enriching both your personal and professional life. Integrity is not about perfection, it is about consistency and authenticity. Admitting fault is a testament to these qualities because it shows that you are willing to be honest even when it is difficult. It demonstrates that you are committed to living by your values, not just when it is convenient, but also when it challenges your pride or ego. This consistency is what makes integrity so powerful. It builds trust, inspires confidence, and creates a sense of stability and reliability in your character. The act of admitting fault also strengthens your inner resolve. It takes courage to face your mistakes, especially in a world that often equates vulnerability with weakness. However, each time you take responsibility for your errors, you reinforce your ability to act with integrity under pressure. This courage becomes a cornerstone of your character, allowing you to navigate future challenges with greater confidence and resilience. It enables you to stand firm in your values, even when doing so is difficult or unpopular. And this strength of character earns the respect and admiration of those around you. Moreover, admitting fault sets a powerful example for others. It shows that integrity is not about being flawless, but about being honest and accountable. It encourages those around you to embrace their own imperfections and to prioritize truth over appearances. This ripple effect can create a culture of integrity where individuals feel empowered to take responsibility for their actions and work collaboratively toward improvement. In this way, the act of admitting fault extends far beyond the individual. It becomes a catalyst for collective growth and ethical living. Ultimately, admitting fault is one of the most tangible ways to demonstrate integrity. It aligns your actions with your values, reinforces your commitment to honesty, and fosters humility and growth. It is an act of courage that strengthens your character, builds trust, and inspires those around you. While it may be uncomfortable in the moment, the long-term impact of living with integrity far outweighs the temporary discomfort of admitting a mistake. Each acknowledgement of fault is a step toward becoming a more authentic, principled, and respected individual. In life, no one escapes the inevitability of making mistakes. It is a fundamental part of being human. However, the true measure of an individual lies not in their ability to avoid errors, but in their willingness to confront them with honesty, humility, and accountability. A person who never says, "I was wrong," locks themselves in a cycle of stagnation, erodes trust, and damages relationships, all while missing the profound opportunities for growth that mistakes provide. Admitting fault is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of strength and integrity. It signals a commitment to truth, personal growth, and the value of relationships over ego. It builds bridges where there might otherwise be walls and fosters an environment of trust, understanding, and collaboration. By embracing the courage to own our errors, we cultivate resilience, inspire respect, and set the foundation for meaningful progress in every aspect of life. Ultimately, the willingness to say I was wrong is a profound act of self-awareness and humanity. It is an invitation to grow, connect, and lead with authenticity and purpose. In a world that often rewards appearances, it is the humble acknowledgement of imperfection that reveals the greatest strength of character and paves the way to a richer, more fulfilling existence.